Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast, hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, Mr. Richard Spray. Oh, it takes me back to when I was a small boy watching that man with the big moustache. How you doing, Richard?
Oh man, that's fantastic. You keep knocking them out of the park, buddy. A lot of bangers you're throwing at me in the morning. It's amazing. Love it. Magnum PI action.
It's the middle of the week, and like all Forest fans, we're still riding high, nursing nosebleeds, and still constantly checking the Premier League table to make sure it isn't all a dream. Booking.com and Trivago have never been so busy. Today, our very special guest is an award-winning journalist and a favourite contributor on the very popular Forest Focus. Richard and I are excited to take a dive into the Reds with one of the fan base's most respected voices, with insights, stories, and no-nonsense takes. Our guest today knows Nottingham Forest inside and out. So get ready for candid conversations, deep dives into the club's past and present, and the kind of analysis only a true Forest expert can bring. A guest we have long coveted. This is the one with Pete Blackburn. Pete, it's great to have you with us, Pete. How are you, sir?
I'm good, yeah. I'm a bit daunted, to be honest, because that intro was absolutely absurd. Yeah, I felt like you might have built me up a little bit too much. I'm not sure.
Well,
I don't claim any expertise on anything. But yeah, no, happy to be here. Looking forward to finding out if all your guests receive a hamper from your main sponsors as well. So yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, I'm sure something could be arranged, but no, the intro is well deserved because you are a respected voice on Forest Focus that Richard and I are members of and have been for a long time and continue to be. And I've always loved watching and we continue to love watching. So, it was the inspiration really for us to set up Talking Reds. We thought we want to do a bit more of that kind of chatting on podcasts and that. And our direction is really to take the one with episodes to find out about people from the fan base. People that have maybe got a profile or some that don't have a profile. If you're joining us in the comments, don't forget to say hello. We want to make sure that we can name drop and shout out to you. So please do say hi. And of course, if you're listening to this later on, either on Apple or Spotify or indeed on the YouTube playback, please do know that you're very welcome. You're perhaps having a workout in the gym or walking the dog. Maybe you're having a nice bath. Either way, we thank you for joining us too. Please do also hit like and subscribe on this video. We really appreciate everybody that's helping us along. We're trying to get ourselves up to that magical 1,000 by Christmas or even by 2025. That 1,000 subscribers would be amazing. We thank you very much for everyone that's pushed the button so far. Right, let's get into it. Pete, you are an award-winning journalist. You've won a British Journalism Award in December 2023 for investigations into the state of mental health services and the impact of austerity politics on communities. And I will also add that you did that as a collaboration with a friend of yours, Ben Islands. So it's important that we name drop him as well. But you're nominated again this year. Fantastic. Well done. And I think it's all by yourself in the specialist journalism category for your piece for the British Medical Association, The Doctor. So we're going to find out about that in a moment. We want to hear about that kind of side to your story. But first and foremost, we always begin by asking everyone their own Forest story, how they came to be a fan, how it all started. So take it away, Pete. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I guess for me, it all comes down to one thing, really. That's just my brother. We grew up just behind Central Avenue in West Bridgford, probably just a sort of mere Matt Sells ping away from the cricket ground and the city ground with a bit of carry, probably. Mum and Dad weren't football fans. No great history of football in our family at all. It's not one of those sort of dynasties. Our family were all from Lincolnshire, actually, various parts of Lincolnshire, and there's the odd bit of sort of Boston United in the family. So they're my second team. I go very occasionally, but really it was all about my brother Simon, who's 3 years older than me. And childhood really was being a sort of classic younger brother, I suppose, and just taking on everything that my older brother gave to me. So, I mean, when we were young, he used to put me in goal in our driveway while he acted out both teams and commentated. We'd write out the team sheets, and I mean, it got crazily in depth sometimes. I've got some sort of vague memories of going to the Lake District on a holiday one year in the 90s, and I was sort of imagining that we'd taken over the local team in Kendal and transferred all of the Forest reserves there for one of our sort of imaginary games. So I think looking back, I was playing the part of Forest's, I'm not sure if he was second or third goalkeeper back then, Tommy Wright, who'd become Kendal FC's goalkeeper while we were there. Which I think was probably quite an ambitious transfer. I'm not sure what level they were playing at the time, or if it even existed, to be honest. Actually, not too long ago, actually, I had a look back to check it was Tommy Wright that I was thinking of, and I'm pretty sure it was. And my word, we had some incredible goalkeeping kits back in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. I think there was one with this built-in turtleneck and a sort of magnificent grey, purple, and blue pattern across it. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, my brother was all in on Forest, and that meant that I was all in on Forest. So we were both born and raised in Nottingham and so close to the ground. I don't recall there ever being any sense of choice about it. I don't recall ever wanting a choice about it or considering that. It's just what it was. And I think looking back, even sort of going through primary school, like pretty much all of my friends, I think, were Forest fans. I grew up with one Everton fan, but he had a sort of strong family ties through his dad and his dad's family. But otherwise, I think it just was Forest. So yeah, so much of, I guess, what I am has been passed down from my brother, I think. But music, football, all that sort of stuff. So he was engaged with Forest much before me, I guess, because of his age, and I just consumed everything via him. I learned how to look at the news on teletext, and we played those early Championship Manager games and heard all about the players. And I think I sort of built this picture of Forest before I even started going to games. I mean, he even once did. He once did Stuart Pearce's big shop at the Co-op on Bridgewood Road, which was at the end of our road. So, that sort of stuff was all around me growing up. Cloughie was obviously in the newsagents on Central Avenue, so there's a sort of looming sense of history, right near my house, I guess, really. So yeah, it was just sort of always there. Never much of a choice. I mean, yeah, I don't know how much more detail you want me to go into or talk about first games or any of that sort of stuff, but yeah, it just was there. It was from my brother, and there's never really been a moment when it hasn't been since.
So did you guys end up going to matches together quite frequently? Because you said your parents really weren't into going. So were you guys going together without them, or would they reluctantly take you? I mean, how was that growing up in terms of your ability to go to matches frequently, given how close it was? Yeah,
it's a good question that strikes quite a fond memory, actually, because I didn't go to many games with my brother when we were growing up, because I guess it was that sort of age difference where he very much would have wanted to be with his mates at that sort of time, I think. So I think, my memory is pretty sketchy, and actually the first sort of game that I can remember in any detail is definitely not the first game that I went to. But it sort of has to be in that sense. And I went with my mum to those early games, as I recall it. And the main reason I remember is because every single time the opposition got over the halfway line, she would just scream at the top of her voice, just like just pure terror. And that really, I remember that sort of really sticking with my brother and I as we grew up, because I think she took both of us to our first, or some of our first games, and it was just like, what on earth is this woman doing? But I just don't think she could handle the tension of the whole thing. But that's like a really nice, fond memory that sticks with me. So yeah, the first game that I can remember in any sort of fulsome detail, I sort of have flashes of memories of the Frank Clark team, but I think they're really memories of memories now. So I'm not sure to what extent I can really rely on them. But the first game that I really remember in any detail was Forest Middlesbrough in 97-98, the promotion season. We beat them 4-0 at home, and it was I guess the reason why it sticks in the mind so much is because it was just it was remarkable. It was a masterclass on the way to a brilliant conclusion of the season. And all I think of when I think of that game is just Pierre Van Hooijdonk and his long legs and those predator boots. And I mean, I've written about this a few times for various places. I think I did a piece about it for Bandy and Shinty back a few years ago, and it just feels so evocative. I think he had 4 or 5 free kicks in that game, and one of them he masterfully curled in, and then the others were all bang on target. Bit of a cliche now, I suppose, but it just did feel like it was a penalty when he had a free kick. It was just that sort of opportunity, I guess. And I think the other scorers in the game were Campbell and Cooper, who were my other 2 sort of early heroes in the playground, I guess. So obviously very sad news about Kevin Campbell not so long ago. And I think I tweeted at the time that in the sort of school playground then, so I was at primary school at the time. I was Colin Cooper on the pitch, but sort of wanted to be Kevin Campbell, and I guess that sort of sums up my memories of that time. That Forest team was sort of really in me and my friends, and we were all running around pretending to be them.
And now you've got your own family. Have you passed on the Forest baton to maybe your wife? I mean, is she a football fan at all, or children? Is that how it's working now, and passing it on so that the Forest line stays within the family?
That hasn't worked out too well yet. I mean, my wife came to, I think she's come to 2 Forest games with me, and both of them were so unmemorable that I can't remember what they were. I think one of them was a 0-0 draw with Sheffield United, and we watched it from the Trent End Upper. But again, I'm always a bit hesitant to be totally sure if these are proper memories or not, because I've got a vague feeling that Lewis McGugan was playing in the hole that night and had one sort of dribbled shot from outside the area, and that was all that happened in the game. And I think that was the first time I took her, and it was freezing. I remembered my feet being numb and just thinking, like, I mean, this is horrible, and I don't know how she's putting up with this. And I think we went through a game 1 Christmas period, perhaps about a decade ago. But yeah, not since then. I'm not sure she's too keen, but she tolerates me going and watching on TV and all that sort of stuff, and doing endless podcasts. So I'm very grateful for that. And my son's only 3, so he's got a couple of Forest kits and that sort of stuff. But it's early days yet, and I'm not sure quite how old I'll need him to be to feel like I'm safe taking him to the ground, to be honest, because it's obviously pretty raucous. But hopefully it won't be too long.
Yeah, I didn't take Orlando to a match until he was about 5.5 or nearly 6. So his first match was obviously first season back in the Premier League. We went to a pre-season friendly against Valencia at Notts, and then we managed to get tickets to go to Spurs, which is down the road from us. And by that point, I'd managed to really make sure that he knew what the drill was. Because we live in the Spurs area, so Spurs and Arsenal could quite easily be in the influence. But no, he's diehard, so there's plenty of time for you to get to massage the Forest thing, and being in the Premier League as well, it makes it a bit easier, I think, as well. Can
I ask you a sort of fatherhood question on that?
You can.
Would you guys? What would you sort of be comfortable with in terms of your offspring supporting other clubs? Because I often think if I lived in a different place, perhaps in Nottingham, I'd probably be pretty happy with them supporting whichever the local team was, if that's where they went. But I would be drawing lines at buying Man City shirts or any of that sort of stuff.
It was just a non-starter for me. It would never ever going to happen. I inherited it from my dad, who grew up in Hucknall. Obviously, you can hear that I'm a bit of a southerner. So Forest is the family team, and so to be honest with you, it's been amazing that Orlando, my son, just wanted to be like me, and because I watched Forest so much and the passion I've got for them, I think sons want to copy their fathers to a certain degree, and that kind of rubbed off. But if he did turn around to me and say, "Dad, I think I want to support Spurs," it would be absolutely a nail in the heart. But I think we've gone way past that now, because he's got kits galore. We're coming on Sunday to Newcastle. We can't wait. We've been to matches. He is passionate. But to your question, if he'd kind of fallen into football when all of his, because he goes to school when there's Arsenal and Spurs, obviously. If he did get influenced now, then it would be really difficult. But ultimately, you can't control an individual, can you? So you just have to let them make the mistakes. I mean, my dad you know, mum and dad let me make plenty of mistakes of my own. I don't know about. I mean, Richard, it's a bit different for you over in the States, perhaps, because you know it's you know, football is obviously not as prominent perhaps as it is here.
Yeah, it's interesting that being in the US, because of course you're not as committed to certain teams based off of locale, right, and region. At least in relation to football. I mean, in American football terms, yeah, my son actually asked me one time, he said, because we have a big rivalry, right? So the University of Oklahoma is right down the street from us, and they've been a storied American college football team for years, and so we've followed them. My family came from here on my stepdad's side, so we very much embraced that familial sort of thing, that dynasty thing that Greg was alluding to earlier. But he asked me one time, he's like, if I decided to go to University of Texas and become they're the Longhorns, that's their mascot. If I became a Longhorns fan, how would you feel? I'm like, well, clearly there would be a serious concern about your mental well-being for supporting such a team. But no, I jokingly said to him, I said, look, if that's what you chose to do and that made you happy and you enjoyed going to university there and you embraced that culture and that team, that's your decision. But thankfully, like Greg, he has very much been indoctrinated with, whether it be, you know, the Detroit Lions in the NFL, University of Oklahoma and American college football, Nottingham Forest. But he did kind of at one time flirt with Manchester United because, you know, he just hadn't really got into it, and everybody at school was wearing Man City, Manchester United, Chelsea, or Arsenal jerseys, right? Because that's what they do in the States. Those are the teams they support typically, right? Unless you happen to have a connection, or you're like Bruce, who was on our episode the other day in Texas, who just seems to adopt Forest and love it and embrace the chaos and the suffering to eventual, you know, where we are now in a euphoria. But yeah, similar to you, Greg, it's the same situation. I'd be gutted. I'd be sad, but wouldn't turn my back on my son for choosing a different path if he chose to. Ooh,
Friar Tuck says in the comments, it's your job as his dad to ensure
That's
he's a
right.
Forest fan. My dad would never let me consider another club. Same with my kids. Here, Friar Tuck. Pass on our regards to Robin.
That's a slightly stronger opinion than I've got, but I mean, like, I think where I live now, it would probably be Forest or something sort of relatively non-league, so I guess it wouldn't matter too much anyway. But I do recall thinking when I last lived in London that if we'd had a son there, I wouldn't have a problem with him being a Leyton Orient fan because they were just down the road and it felt like a proper thing to do. I think it'd be different if it was.
That's real football, isn't it? Though? I mean, if you those teams are inoffensive, and it's like, I always look at the likes of Leyton Orient and League One, League Two teams, and they've got young children in their crowd with their family, and I absolutely adore that because that's their club, that's their local team, and it's an amazing thing when clubs are still managing to connect with the community, managing to connect with their fan base. You know, it's very, very easy for a child to go, I want to support Man City and Chelsea and all the big boys because they're the successful ones in the Premier League, and so that's what makes, I think, our country, maybe the United Kingdom as a whole, and Scotland is included, you know, it's very tribal in many, many ways. Of course, there are some people that want to jump on the bandwagon and just go for the big boys. But one thing I love about the UK and the league system here is that, you know, it is familial. It is very much that it's passed down from generation to generation. And we see that in the Forest fan base as well. So, you know, long may that continue. I want to quickly just make sure we say hello to Raf. He's very excited that Pete's with us today. So Raf, regular contributor, he's thrilled to have you on board with us. Hi to Tim. He's talking about Anthony Taylor being a ref on Sunday at Newcastle. That'll be interesting. We'll talk more about that a bit later on. Trent 88. Hi guys, nice red carpet laid out for Pete. We would give nothing else, of course. Good morning to David Baker as well. And also to Louise, who just came up on the comments. She says, my ex-husband was a Liverpool fan. It was my duty to ensure our son supported Forest and not Liverpool, which he does, thankfully. Louise, we salute you for your motherly duties there. Right, just moving along. Pete, mentioned right at the top about your profile. You've been on Forest Focus for a while now, but you've got a very strong journalistic background of your own. Tell us about how your journey into journalism started, where it's taken you, and where you're at now.
Big question. I went to Nottingham Trent Uni after I graduated from my undergraduate to do newspaper journalism masters, So I guess that's sort of the beginning of the story. I mean, before that, I'd done a lot of sort of Forest fanzine writing and all that sort of stuff, and a bit of cricket and various things. So I think, like lots of particularly boys then, but I think thankfully it's becoming a bit less gendered. At the time, I sort of thought, well, what do I like? Well, I sort of like writing and I like sport, so I'll see if I can put those things together. So I did the masters and an awful lot of work experience along the way. So I had some really cool stuff. I covered a bit of Test cricket at the Independent, like very very loosely, not in a sort of very serious way, but I was sort of doing little match summaries for them, and some Olympics for a sort of magazine publishing company, and then eventually I'd done loads of work experience for the local paper, the Nottingham Post, and that just seemed like the obvious way to sort of get into things. So in October 2012, I think it was, I started at the Post, trainee reporter. It was a great start. The first I didn't get the job on the initial interview because I mean, we're allowed to swear at all on this. What's the? You're muted, Greg. I tell you what, I won't swear, but you're going to know what it is.
You can beep it out. It's fine. You can. I think one's allowed.
One of the news editors at the time thought I was a something head in my interview. I think maybe I was trying to go over the top a little bit with my sort of sell, and I probably maybe came across as too confident, even though I had no clue what I was doing. Eventually, I got the job because I think somebody else turned it down. And the first thing that happened when I got the job was that I had a phone call from the editor saying, oh, actually, the salary is £1,000 less than we said it was. And the salary was 14 grand, I think, anyway. So it was a hell of a start. But yeah, I became a trainee reporter at the Post and sort of desperately tried to get myself involved with all things sport while I was there. So the trainee reporter job is news. So I eventually I'd sort of ingratiated with the sports desk a little bit as well, and I covered some really good stuff. I mean, sports-wise, I did half the season of Mansfield getting promoted from the conference, which was brilliant, sort of spearheaded by Paul Cox and Matt Green up front, and it was a really exciting time for the club, and obviously they're going strength to strength now, which is nice to see. The little bit of Notts County and a few managers actually on and off, sort of Chris Kwame, Sean Derry, Ricardo Moniz, little bits and bobs, and quite a bit of cricket, Notts, and a couple of Ashes series at Trent Bridge and all that sort of stuff. So I was sort of doing bits of sport while also doing my main job, which was news at the time. I sort of fell into doing health journalism at the Post. You just get put in a team when you go to a local paper like that, and I was sort of put under the health correspondent, and just after a bit of time getting used to working in what was frankly a terrifying environment a lot of the time. The local newsroom is insane, and there's no workplace like it. You know, the profanities are endless. It often feels like a pretty abusive relationship. I mean, there was one point when I was working at the Post where I had an eye spasm for 6 months because of the stress of it all. But generally, I got on pretty well and sort of began to love journalism, and I became much more interested in the sort of news and health side of things. So sport sort of frittered out for me. I found it all just a little bit too. I don't know how to describe it really. Sometimes I felt like it didn't matter to me enough, I think, in a sense, to be interviewing managers about what happened during a game and stuff. I just got much more of a buzz from breaking stories and from trying to sort of do campaigning pieces, and we did some amazing stuff at the Post like that. I mean, one of the things that really sticks in my mind is that there were a sort of group of children who were supposed to be having this type of operation that would have helped them be able to walk. They all had a condition that meant it was really difficult for them to walk, and these operations all got cancelled. And one of the things we were able to do was just start a campaign to change that. And in the end, we'd won sort of 150 grand's worth of operations for these kids that is just life-changing stuff. And
amazing.
It was these sorts. I mean, that's not to blow my own trumpet. That's just what you would do in that circumstance, I think. But just to explain the sort of impact it can have for you and for people, it just felt more important to me. So that's sort of where I went with it. And then I left the Post in 2016 and moved down to London to work for the British Medical Association, where I still work now. And we have a monthly magazine that goes to sort of 150,000 doctors, which is, I mean, it's a big readership in a sense because it's probably a similar readership to say The Guardian or something, but it's a very specific readership. But also, our stuff goes online and in other papers and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, nowadays, I guess I'm a sort of campaigning investigative journalist focused on health and politics and sort of social justice issues, particularly, I suppose. Sorry,
Incredible.
that all sounds.
No, it's phenomenal. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's hard not to
Go ahead,
sound
Greg.
like a sort of lofty idiot when you talk about yourself, isn't it?
No.
No, not at all. We asked the question. We want to know. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, sorry for switching gears, but no, that's incredible. I mean, it's just, the meaningfulness of what you're doing. I mean, we all love football. We all love our club. We all love talking about that thing. It's a great decompression thing, right? But at the same time, it's amazing that you're doing something that I think has so much meaning for you personally, and that you feel like you're making an impact in the world. And that's all you'd want, right, from what you do for a living. And that's amazing. Appreciate that.
Can I just add as well that just quickly, we want people to know more about you, because I think people are genuinely interested. People see you come on Forest Focus and they really enjoy listening to what you've got to say alongside with all the other people. But I think what we want to do here is just try and pull the curtain back slightly, and just you can say what you're comfortable to say, and people can go, you know what, actually I've always wondered about Pete because he speaks so well. I wonder what he does, or what is his background, and just kind of like you allowing us to know a little bit more about what you're doing in your job and what's you're passionate about. We really enjoy hearing that kind of stuff. So by all means, if we're asking the questions because we want you to say, we're very keen to hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a question. So I had a really interesting conversation with Greg Mitchell when I had the blessing and opportunity to come over to the UK, and we talked about American football, and he kind of explained to me his sort of growing passion for that sport, and especially the college university side of it, because it's very different than the NFL. It's probably not as well known in the UK, obviously, as the NFL is, because it's marketed so heavily, but it is very much like about that culture, that place, right? And it's very much regional, and it's very much locally sourced, and it just makes it's just a part of kind of that area's DNA. So in your mind, in terms of thinking about that as it relates to Forest, like in terms of the identity of the city, and so in your perspective, what lasting impact do you think that the club has had, and as it relates to the Nottingham community and its sense of pride, and it's sort of oriented around that? I mean, how much do you think that's true? How much do you think that matters to the place in and of itself that is Nottingham, and just the culture and the community itself?
Is it? What a fascinating question. I think this is probably a PhD or an essay topic, to be honest. But I'll try not to do that.
We've got more of those.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long podcast. I think there is an intrinsic link. I mean, I'm aware that anything that I answer to a question like that really is going to be massively coloured by my sort of sense of romance and bias, because, I am of both those things. I am of Nottinghamshire, and I am of Forest. And my personal feeling is that there is just a totally intrinsic link between the city and the football club, and the impact the football club has on the people here. And I think that's pretty easily documented, because in the good times you see the movement of people out on the streets. The old video of so I was lucky enough when I was at the Post to get to see sort of all the bits of I Believe in Miracles as the early stages that were being made and such like. So we were going to cover it all coming out, and as part of that, we sort of went down to, I think it was Confetti, to see the previews and stuff before it had all the music and all that sort of stuff, and get prepared for covering the whole thing. And I guess that was sort of the sort of experience that showed me that link, because I mean, there's stuff in the film that everyone will have seen, where the club come back for that open top bus type parade, and there's a brilliant bit where they're going through, I think it's through Bridgeford actually, and there's nobody there, and they're sort of like, well, what on earth is happening? Why is there nobody here? And then suddenly they find the crowds, and it's enormous. And I think there is a massive link there, because actually it's easy to say Clough put Forest on the map, but it's true. But I think it's also true that Clough put Nottingham on the map, because realistically, Nottingham is not a big place. It's not iconic for an awful lot of things. We obviously have some great industrial traits in our past, And like lots of cities sort of struggle to cope with the legacy of losing those things, I suppose. But, Nottingham is actually a city that is down on its luck in many ways. We have amazing things in Nottingham, we have amazing people, we have amazing independent businesses, all that sort of stuff. But, this is one of the most deprived cities in the country, one of the most deprived local authority areas. I think last time I looked at those stats were in the sort of top 10. As an aside, one of the reasons why I find the sort of poverty chanting and stuff at Forest games so difficult to cope with.
Yeah, fully agreed.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sort of rambling here, but I think that Forest give Nottingham a sort of a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of being on the map that you don't get in lots of different ways. And that's a beautiful thing. You always hear people talking about going abroad, and the first thing that someone says when you say you're from Nottingham, and we all have those experiences. That stuff isn't just like rare anecdote; it's just fact, isn't it? There is nothing more Nottingham than Robin Hood or Brian Clough and Nottingham Forest, and that's a magical thing. So you saw that in those videos of I Believe in Miracles, and you see it in the last couple of years with what we had here. I mean, look at what happened at the council house. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, nobody in the city has got a job, clearly, because everybody was there on a weekday celebrating Forest going up to the Premier League. But there is clearly a link, and whether it's just my sort of personal feeling or not, it does feel like this is a more sort of buoyant place in a sense while we're riding high. And I think that's a special thing, isn't it?
It is. So how do you think the relationship between the club and the fans has evolved? I mean, particularly when we think about the times of challenge that we've experienced in the last 23 years and triumph that we're kind of getting a taste of at the moment. I mean, what would you say is unique about the loyalty of Forest fans?
That's a really good question. And something that I've thought about a fair bit, I think. Now, I think I've probably got some views on this that are probably not necessarily crowd pleasers. I'm not sure if Forest fans are unique necessarily, but I think it's certainly true that what's happened in recent years in the way that Forest fans performed and what we've given to the team has felt pretty unique. I mean, if as much as something can be pretty unique, certainly, obviously, we're much closer to it than we are any other club or environment. So it's hard to say, but I just haven't seen the sort of the noise and the ferocity of support that Forest fans have given the club in recent years anywhere else. It's worth saying that when Forest have been down on their luck, for lots of years, I don't think you could really say that Forest fans have sort of been extraordinary through that period. Lots of us still went. Sometimes I had a season ticket in League One for some of it, and it was horrendous. But my memories of those days are not like my memories of recent days. I would go to games and it was quite sad sometimes. It was quiet. It was an awful lot of moaning. It was lots of my granny could do better than that. All that sort of stuff that you hear anywhere at football matches. It's not about us or Forest fans, but I suppose it's just ultimately very hard to be excitable when things are so hard. And we've had a tough run, haven't we? I mean, well, certainly up until recently, it was hard, and it did feel like it was going nowhere for a long time, particularly in the depths of League One, where it was just, it's just brutal. Some of the footballers and the managers and the things you put up with, it's just crazy. So, yeah, I think the Forest story is a few things of late. You have to give massive credit to Forza Garibaldi, who took, I think, a tired and apathetic Forest crowd, but probably one who had like a spark. There was there's something to be lit there. Clearly, it's happened, so it must have been. So maybe that makes us special. I'm not sure, but having experienced the difficult times, I'd say we weren't special then. We were struggling, and understandably so. But yeah, so Forza lit something. I think they just decided. I don't want to speak for these guys because it's nothing to do with me, but it just felt like they decided like enough was enough, and regardless of what Forest is going to be on the pitch or off the pitch, we're going to be there to make something of it, because we are going to go to these games and we're going to have Forest in our hearts, and we might as well try and make this something special and change that dynamic a little bit so that we can contribute to any potential success we might have, or just lift the players at 0.5% or whatever it might be. And I think I started noticing that stuff, I guess, under Montagnier, and it built through Lamucci, and there's just a real sort of growing sense of the impact Forza have been able to have, and hopefully we're able to get back to them doing as many displays as they can and all that sort of stuff, because I think it's remarkable what they do, and I think the impact they have on my feeling of being a Forest fan and the sense I get from just watching a game on TV when they do a banner if I'm not there or something, I think it's huge. The one I think about, there's so many of those displays that I think are amazing. The one I think about recently is that Morgan Gibbs White one where he looks up, and I just think, like, what must that have done for the bloke? I can't imagine that feeling, and it must be enormous. So for those players in that football club to feel like we're there with them, that must be enormous. And I think we've all got memories recently of where we felt how important that was. I think the biggest one for me is that Sheffield United at home game where in the playoffs where I just don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we carried the players across the line that day. With some pretty significant help from Brice Samba towards the end. But, I do think that's a real thing, and I've never experienced that at a football match before. So there's my argument for Forest fans being special. But, I guess there's also the alternative argument in history. So I don't know what the answer to that question is, to be honest. But, I've sort of postulated around both sides of it, but certainly it feels incredibly special now. And I guess the other thing to mention alongside Forza is Steve Cooper. I just think he transformed everything. It felt like we had someone at the football club who was one of us. And I've written at great length about what Steve Cooper meant to me. And it's still something that sort of makes me feel slightly choked to think about that sort of relationship. And I've boxed that away now because he's somewhere else, and that sort of all feels like something different now. But my God, what that bloke did to make us all dream again was pretty special.
Absolutely, yeah. It's interesting. Like you touched on kind of being a part of that initial, sort of the latter years of the Clough era, and then the beginning of, with Frank Clark. And I know with Greg and I, we've talked about a lot about that's the era we grew up in, right? Like he was right on the edge of that European Cup period. I was after that of, in terms of when I really understood what football is, and I got really into it as a child. And my granddad, he fostered all that, and being a lifelong resident of Nottingham, it was easy for him to do. But it's an interesting period of time, right? These last few years in terms of reconciling ourselves. So do you feel like against what the history was versus what we had become, like you touched on? So do you think how do you think this current sort of period, after going through what we went through, all that time away from the Premier League, outside the top flight, how much do you think that's sort of, has it sort of harkened back to an identity, or is it sort of creating a new one? Because from your perspective, how do you see that? Because I feel like there's a pieces of it. We haven't won 2 European Cups yet in a row. We've won, but we feel pretty strong about where we're headed right now. But in your mind, is it sort of getting back to what was our identity, or is it sort of creating a new one?
I think that I'm going to answer this question in a way that sounds massively like I'm getting out of answering it, but I think that's probably a question for everyone to answer in their own way, because really, what is all of this stuff? It's how we feel about it, isn't it? And we all feel differently about it, and that sort of feeling is built up of our memories and our relationships and all of those experiences over the years. So for you guys, it's a very different thing to what it is for me, because I don't have that that sort of history of real strong success and identity. That's not a part of my Forest experience. So really, my experience as a Forest fan is, sort of minor ups and downs. Generally nothing sort of extraordinary, and then suddenly a pretty crazy explosion out of nowhere, but with a sort of sense of, studying would be too strong a word, but being interested in the past and having, interviewed a lot of those miracle men and those figures from our sort of our history and our legacy and such like. So I don't know if it feels like a sort of a return to identity or anything for me, because it's just so very different to anything that I've really experienced before. Frank Clark's Forest finishing third, I think it was it in the top division. That's just not really that's not really a memory of any great power for me. It's like it's something that loomed over my childhood, but it wasn't really part of me in that sense. I wasn't there. I wasn't at all the games. I've got a couple of friends who went to the European nights and such like, but it was just a bit too soon for me. So it's a very different experience, I guess. So for me, it's sort of creating something new. But there are things that tie me in my Forest experience that are sort of outside all of this success and such like. And the identity for me really is the link between community and football club. And it's a continuation in many senses in that way, because we got promoted with a team that was the spine of which was of us. It was our people from the schools we went to and the streets that we walked, and we still have a bit of that in Ryan Yates dominating Premier League midfields. A guy who, he was on Forest Focus a couple of weeks ago, and when I watch him speak on a sort of more candid interview, I feel like incredibly emotional. So there's obviously a sort of continuation of identity that's built into my feelings, and I think I guess the academy, youth, all localism, these things all matter to me. So I guess that, to go back to what I said initially, it's different for all of us, isn't it? I don't really know what identity and legacy necessarily mean in a wider sense, because we just all have such a different experience of that.
Stay with us, guys. We're going to be getting into more Forest chat in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor. So if you're watching, you're going to see the nice video. If you're listening, you're going to be able to hear the nice Yorkshireman giving his recent review of the Cheese Trader.
This York shop is a cheese lover's paradise. The Cheese Trader is home to an array of fine British cheeses, not only selling it but offering an epic cheesy street food menu too. Guests can choose from a main dish and then select all the different types of cheese they'd like on top, alongside an array of other toppings. We tried their loaded fries and posh cheese toasties, both of which were absolutely smothered in gorgeous melted cheddar. We even chose a whole camembert to top our fries, which was so tasty, like a cheesy salt and pepper dish. The posh cheese on toast was some of the best toast we've ever had, with so many amazing flavours to it that perfectly paired with the cheese, tucked away just off Grape Lane. This is the perfect spot for a great lunch.
Oh man, my mouth is watering.
We do it. It happens every time. The Cheese Trader in York, Mr. Stu Freestone. Go and see him if you're in the area. Don't forget to mention Talking Reds for a 10% discount. And he caters for all of your functions. If you've got a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something similar, and you want some specialty cheeses, then Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader, is your man. All the details are in the bio. Pete, we'll have a chat with Stu and we'll see if we can get you a nice little luxury something. No, don't worry about that. We'll sort you out. Right. Okay. So
you guys do favourite cheese with your guests, like the sort of the famed Forest Focus pizza question. I feel like you should.
Well, it's interesting you should say that.
Sorry,
because that more of that later. Well, no. This is good. We like the way you're thinking. Forest fans have always, well, not always, but in recent times have taken criticism for living in the past. The past glories of the European Cup and singing about the European days. And opposition fans can sometimes, give it back, say, you weren't even born, and that kind of stuff. But obviously, we've got a proud history. And when we talk to you about the past, and it's because the impact that Clough had on Forest and Nottingham, as you say, was so significant. And so I think what happens in the past does intrinsically link to the present and the future. But making our own legacy, or the current club and the current side making its own legacy and its own mark on the footballing world, is something that we want them to have and do in an unhindered sense. We don't. Steve Cooper definitely embraced the history, and I think that was a good thing. Too many managers in the past possibly really tried to eradicate it from the club, and that didn't go down well at all. So it is about striking a fine balance. But ultimately, we live in the present, and in the present, at the moment, it looks like this on the screen. There's the Premier League table.
It's nice,
and It is nice, and we're going to revel in it, Pete. We're going to enjoy it because it may well be that we don't finish in that position. We might finish higher, but we said at the start of the season on Talking Reds that a 12th place finish was where we judged it could go to, and that was based on us going through all the results, doing all the points, and comparing it to seasons past. I mean, if we finish outside the top 10 now, I personally might feel a bit disappointed because the start is the start we've got. But Pete, I mean, thinking about the current squad, thinking about the table, thinking about the start that we've had, sum up your thoughts for us on the current state of play for this Nottingham Forest team.
Oh, be another big old question. My current thoughts are, isn't this absolutely lovely? I'm having a great time. I think it sort of feels like it's been a bit of a long time coming in a sense, in that this is our third season in the Premier League, and I think the first two were sort of, the joy of them was amazing in parts, but also sort of dampened by some of the chaos and the various difficulties that we had. And I've not really enjoyed the parts of it where we've been talked about so much in a slightly negative way. I mean, like this last week, my sort of podcast list that I've been downloading, half of them we've got Forest as the first talking point, and it's all exciting stuff. And that has just marked such a nice change for me. It's great to see this side being talked about for what they're good at, for being ruthless with clean sheets and rapid on the counter and being a threat to every team in this division, and that's awesome. I think where we've landed, I think, is that we've done the right thing in giving time and space to a manager who I think showed enough promise last season to earn a bit of that. I mean, it was a real big talking point, I'm sure, for everybody, and on the Forest Focus pod, I often found myself sort of defending Nuno as a long-term proposition. And, admittedly, part of that was just because I wanted to stick with a manager. We just often haven't done that. Not really any sort of great hindsight about, any sort of genius on my part about what we were going to be. But, there was a bit of sense in the data that things were going the right way and that we were a bit unlucky and a bit punished by errors and that sort of stuff. So I'm really glad that they stuck with it. And I'm really glad that we had a targeted summer where the recruitment was just sharp and precise, and we didn't see massive overhaul, and we've got away with not selling anyone that we wanted to keep. And I mean, some absolutely, frankly, in terms of PSR, that I still have no idea how we've got over the line, because my word, we've brought in some cash for some players that we just don't need in our squad right now, which is, pretty phenomenal. But yeah, we just look like a really lovely, balanced side, and we're soaking up injuries, somehow getting on with it, and people are rising to the challenge, and all the things that people say about these bench options we've got now, with players who seem hungry to come on and make their impact. And there's so many players that are likable. It seems like a really good bunch. We've got this little group of lads who just seem to bring fun to everything, in Aina and Alanga and Hudson-Odoi and such like. And I think that must be a hugely important thing for the dressing room. And then you've got players like Yates and Milankovic who are just taking absolutely no S and are just driving us on. And yeah, it's just a tremendously exciting time, isn't it? I mean, I don't expect us to be above any of those teams in that picture that I can see come the end of the season, but I'm really, really delighted if we can finish in that top half still. I think it's very early to be talking about the table. I mean, we can talk about it because it's very exciting, but really third place doesn't mean anything now, because it's one place from fourth and fifth and sixth, and it's 1 point, and it's 3 points from seventh. So realistically, the actual numbers of the table don't really mean anything. But it's about the performances and the fear that we're striking in opposition teams, and we're becoming a genuine prospect that other teams should be concerned about. And I don't think there's a single football team in this league that we can't go and get a result against. And I think it's much better than that. Frankly, I think we can have good hope of getting a result against any team in this league, because I think we can play in different ways. We've been a very proficient counter-attacking team, and we've developed an ability to defend compactly and do that really well. But, I was listening to a podcast on my dog walk this morning. I think it was the TIFO football podcast that The Athletic do. And they were saying, so there's been 4 games out of the 10 this season that Forest have had more possession in, and we've won 2 and drawn 2 of those games. And for me, that's like quite a striking stat, because it shows that this is a team that's changing and is able to be adaptable and do things in a different way. So personally, I just think on the pitch, everything is just so positive right now.
Yep.
There's an awful lot to love about that football team, and it's just it's a joy to go to games at the moment.
It is, and you're absolutely right. When you say third place means nothing at the moment after 10 games, it's so true. As football fans and as Forest fans, we are going to revel in the moment, because it's not been as good as this for so long. I think caveating that, knowing full well that it's likely to change. And if we're going into January in any kind of position in the top 10, we're still going to be thrilled. It's what we wanted for the last couple of years after relegation battles and so on. And one thing I've said on this pod, Pete, is that I was a bit disappointed with pundits at the start of this season writing us off so quickly without really having a look at what we were doing and who we brought in. People like Simon Jordan and others that just sort of said, "Oh yeah, and Carragher, Forest are going to be down there again. They're going to get relegated." And I thought that was really lazy journalism. But we've had the start we've had, Pete. The first 5 matches. On the screen for those listening, I put the first 5 matches and the last 5 matches, and a comparison. It has us on the first 5 as kind of 8th in the table, and obviously it's turned around in the last 5 where we're 2nd in the table with 5 games and 10 points, second only to Liverpool. And those 3 in a row wins have really helped transform that. Should we be looking at the opposition, Pete, a bit more closely in those 3 games? We played a Crystal Palace team that have got off to a rocky start. We played a Leicester team that just come out of the Championship, and we played a West Ham team that again are in transition. And something I've spoken about at the start of the season as well, I'm not sure if you caught that, Pete, was the number of clubs in the Premier League that had new managers. And that is a variable that brings its own challenges, because it's getting to know how a manager wants you to play. Is it going to work? Is his style of play going to be something that the players can achieve? And West Ham certainly seem like they are, in a transition that's not going so well for them. So how much should we be looking at the opposition in those last 3 matches? And how much do you think we'll know about Forest once we played Newcastle coming up and Arsenal coming up, and of course Man City, who themselves are having a little bit of a rocky moment?
That's a very interesting question. Fact number 1, I guess, is that we will always know more about the team when we play more games. That's a sort of fairly natural observation, and that's always going to be the case. What I think is interesting is that as football fans and as Forest fans, we're so keen to sort of find patterns and to analyse these things, aren't we? But if you think about what we would have said about Forest going into those 3 games that you're now looking at and sort of wondering, were they actually sort of easy games that we should have been doing exactly what we did in? It's a very different story to what it was when we went into them, wasn't it? We went into the Crystal Palace game welcoming a team to the City ground who admittedly had a tough start to the season, but are an incredibly established Premier League team, and the pressure was on because everyone was banging on about the Forest home hoodoo. I think I was the only person on Forest Focus saying I'm not worried about it, because let's just see how it goes, and last season's a long time ago. Everyone was terrified of that, and I think there was a huge sense that perhaps we couldn't play at home, we couldn't get over the line and do that sort of job. And then a few days on, and we've beaten Palace, and then after Palace, everyone was saying, "Yeah, but it's 1-0, and when are we going to really put a team away and deliver a 90-minute performance?" Oh well, here comes West Ham, who've just beaten Man United and have spent inordinate amounts of money on their squad, and you've seen them off. Obviously, you can only play the teams you're given, and there are always going to be narratives before and narratives after. History is written by the victors and all that sort of stuff. Leicester had won 2 games when we went to their place. It's a local derby. It's Steve Cooper. Everything's out the window, and I think we've absolutely dispatched them. But also look deeper into the season. We've gone to Brighton and got a result. We've gone to Liverpool and got a result. We've already played difficult teams, Chelsea. Mm-hmm. I think what this Forest team are showing you is that they can rise to an awful lot of different challenges. They're obviously going to lose games. It's not going to be the case that we only have that one sort of Fulham aberration in our fixture list for an awful lot more time to come. And I'd imagine we'll lose one of the next few, because they're all really, really good sides. But I think we're probably just worrying about things a little bit too much when we start looking back over the fixtures like that and telling ourselves a different story. Because I think you have to try and keep perspective of what the things you were thinking going into those games were. And as I sort of look at it and try and take a step back, and maybe it's just romantic and I'm that sort of sentimental fan, but I take a step back and think, well, that's a Forest side who's just overcome a load of challenges that we were worried about. And there's evidence from early in the season that they can go and do different sort of challenges as well. So, yeah, not concerned, very happy, excited to see what they can do in the coming games, but also not putting any expectation on it, because just because we're third in the table doesn't mean that we should be winning these games. You know, we're still the underdog in these games, and I'm pretty sure Nuno will be hanging on to some of that sense while also making sure that the team feel that they can compete with anyone, because, you know, evidence suggests they can.
One thing that strikes me in this team that you've just touched on is the balance, and having that balance right. I don't think it's been as good as it currently is for a good while. And one player who I know you like, and I definitely like, is Nico Dominguez. And his impact on that midfield area alongside Ryan Yates, it just feels like that chemistry. There's been a coming together that it just seems to work. Now, that's not saying that if he steps out, it's all going to fall apart. But just judging those two in that midfield engine room, they played, if I'm not mistaken, 90 minutes in a row as well. And Dominguez was a player that was quite often getting hauled off on 70 minutes previously. So for him to play 3 in a row, how much of an impact then? Sum up his impact on this current Forest team, Pete.
Well, I think it's been big. I mean, I've really felt for Dominguez, because he's one of those players, and it's all quite cliched football chat really, but he's been so useful in so many different sort of roles and positions that sort of he's ended up becoming a guy that you use as a sort of all-purpose tool whenever you need a threat mitigating against or something along those lines. And I've always felt that he's better than that. And I mean, I can't like overblow my my sort of blowing trumpet for him or anything, because actually, you know, there's been lots of times where I haven't picked him in my sort of starting 11 and stuff, you know, partly just because it just has never really felt like he's that close to it. But I've always felt like he has been underused, and you only have to look at his sort of fairly basic stats to see that he is an absolute monster in the sort of off the ball, out of possession side of the game. His tackling stats are insane. They match up against anyone's, you know, certainly someone like Sangare or whatever. His pressing is relentless. I love his energy. I think sometimes I've heard people whose judgment I trust feel that a couple of things with him. Occasionally he has a sort of slight lack of positional discipline. And the other thing is that he can be sort of out-muscled a bit, like in everything he brings in. One part of the sort of athleticism of the game, he maybe lacks a little bit of strength and power that perhaps the sort of Ryan Yates has. But, you know, they're next to each other now, and they sort of seem to be a great blend. It's fantastic, isn't it? Because I don't think anyone would have picked those two as their sort of starting double pivot, or whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of the season. And I don't think I would have thought, oh, that's a blend that makes loads of sense. But between them, they just seem to be offering exactly what the rest of the team need. They are protection for the defence, their energy and dynamism. They link really well. I mean, Dominguez seems to be able to play those sort of passes that look pretty simple in a sense, but just link the midfield through to that sort of attacking trio or quartet, and just get you up the pitch. And you know, that I think you can't overstate the impact that a duo as dynamic and as energetic as them is having, because they cover so much ground, and we need them to, because Forest play with an out 10, somebody who's quite high up the pitch a lot of the time, and certainly when we're out of possession, we're playing a sort of 4-2-4 or a 4-4-2 to defend attacks, which means our 10 is playing next to the striker, cutting off passing lanes. And you need to have players who can cover a lot of ground, because, you know, there's two of them in there a lot of the time. And those guys have done that magnificently. So, yeah, it's sort of been partly a surprise. Mainly the surprise has been that he's got the run, to be honest, because I've just felt like at every opportunity he's probably going to get taken out, and, you know, Ward-Prowse will come in, or Anderson will drop, or whatever. But it's been really nice to see it. And I sort of hope he can cling on to the place, because he does bring an awful lot. But it's tough, isn't it? Because somebody is a 12th man next game out, right? And that's without thinking about James Ward-Prowse. There's a 12th man, whether it's Elliot Anderson or whoever else, that like fundamentally doesn't deserve to not be in the team. And I'm glad it's not my job. Because
I mean, where are you on that, Pete? Because I'd in the last pod prior to the West Ham game, I'd made the argument that if Morgan was fit, and it turns out he was fit to start, then isn't it better to have Elliot Anderson on the bench? I know that he's a great player. I know he's fantastic, but I don't want to put him into an 8 position or next to Yates. I want to keep Yates and Dominguez in there, and actually having a really strong person off the bench to step in for Morgan later on, as was the case. I mean, he changed the game, and we were looking for the second goal. He come on 2 minutes later. He wins the free kick on the corner of their box, and then lays it back for Callum, who's in worlds of space, admittedly, to score the goal. So where are you with Elliot Anderson? Are you? I know you just touching on about the fact it's not your choice to make, and it is a difficult one. But are you on board the fact that you're going to say, you know what, Elliot, you're going to be my guy off the bench to replace Morgan rather than going into the 8 position?
I don't know. there's my answer for you. I really don't know where I am, and I'm sort of thinking that I almost hope that circumstance, whether it's bits of fitness or who we're playing in the opposition, will mean that there's an element of rotation there, because I want to keep all of those guys happy, and making that choice is horrible. I mean, if I was in the dugout for the next game, I'd stick with the team, and Anderson would be coming off the bench. I don't feel great about it because I think he's been pretty transformative, to be honest. I think what he can offer us is enormous, and we need to invest in a player like that, and that means lots of minutes. But I think the reality is that will happen because of circumstances and context. And there's games coming up where I think there'll probably likely be a role for Anderson playing as one of the wide players, and sort of coming into form a box and all that sort of stuff, and helping us be a little bit more, have a little bit more sort of bodies in the middle of the pitch, I suppose. So I think that's probably likely to happen. But I think for the next
choices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so obviously it's a brilliant place to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
But bloody hell, from a sort of people management perspective, I don't know how you sit down with Elliot Anderson and tell him that he's not in the team, given how well he's played. But I think maybe that's what you have to do right for the next game.
We could be sat here for hours and hours and hours talking to you, Pete, because one thing we knew for certain coming on, that we'd get the kind of answers that all fans want to hear. It's balanced, it's in depth, it's nuanced. We have hit the hour mark, but we still have a couple of things to get through. So if you're still with us, thank you very much for continuing. We've got a couple of our regular features to get through, so they're going to be coming to you just momentarily. So yes.
I've forgotten about this.
Yeah, we ask everyone to put together their favourite personal all-time Reds 11s. Pete, the clock's against us, so we're not going to have to go too in depth. But your team, I'll read it out. You've gone for a Brice Samba in goal, a back three of Murillo, Michael Dawson, and Wes Morgan, and then in the midfield, Ryan Yates, Chris Cohen, Gibbs White, Andy Reid, Brennan Johnson, Pierre Van Hooijdonk, and Taiwo Awoniyi. I mean, it's a fantastic team.
It's absolutely mad.
I love it. I mean, you've got Reedy and Brennan as your wing backs per se, but I'm not quite sure how much defending will go on, especially with Andy Reid down the left. I'm not sure he'll get back. But why have you picked? Take us through one or two of those players and why they're in your team, Pete.
Just as a caveat, this is not an actual formation I'll be putting out if I was a football manager. It's absolutely insane, but it was the easiest way to fit in the people that I wanted to. I guess just what I did really was I wanted a team of players that I made a couple of rules to make it so that I didn't just have the easy choices of picking like Pearce and Collymore and stuff, players that I didn't actually see play an awful lot. So I said to myself, I'm only going to pick players who I think I've seen play live 5 times or more, and it's very much favourite players rather than best. Although both apply to some. So I mean, I had Crosby down until the last minute, but he was the keeper I pretended to be as a kid. I remember he was just enormous and a fantastic character and a real bridge of the Forest past and the sort of presence that I was experiencing then. But then I remember Sheffield United and how I felt, and I just don't think I had a choice but to put Samba in. Wes, my God, I loved Big Wes. I think maybe a bit of revisionism around Wes, because at the time I recall having an awful lot of arguments with Forest fans who were constantly slagging him off. But my word, I loved the guy and what he epitomised, and just those mad runs and man mountain that he was, and what a player as well. You know, you ask Kelvin Wilson about playing alongside him, and he's pretty blooming complimentary. I remember writing a piece for a Forest fanzine when he left for Leicester in 2012, where I incredibly pretentiously sort of reworked the lyrics of just the two of us by the Beatles from Let It Be to tell my story of growing up with Wes Morgan, which was ridiculous, and I'd hate to read it now, but illustrates how I feel about the bloke. You know, it was a real, it felt like a real relationship, which is, you know, that's what football's about. I mean, Dawson and Murillo speak for themselves. Best two centre halves I've seen play for Forest. Just phenomenal, both with brilliant ability in those pinging long range passes and doing the dirty side of the game as well. I mean, Michael Dawson, I think if he'd had a touch more pace, who knows what he could have gone on to do. But yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
Yates and Cohen, I guess. I mean, anyone who's ever tuned into me on Forest Focus before will be bored stiff of me talking about Ryan Yates, but I can't put into words what that guy means. Just phenomenal, and deserves to be in there, because, you know, he's going to make every single player in that team better, perform to their maximum. I think I said it before when we were talking about Yates on the other podcast, that, like, I don't think it's over the top to say that Yates is a model for all of us, not just footballers. He gets everything out of himself, constantly improving, desperation to rise to challenges. I mean, my God, if I could apply like an ounce of that to my existence, then I think I'd be, you know, a transformed character. So hopefully we can all take a bit of that from him. And similar story for Cohen, I suppose, really, but during a sort of half a more difficult period at the club, and then half a just missing out on the big time. And it would have been really nice to see Cohen injury free and in the Premier League and see what he could do, because I think he would probably have risen to the challenge like Yates would, despite, you know, not necessarily being the fastest or the most technical, etc. Those wide men, I think, again speak for themselves. Like Andy Reid was the magician of those sort of early mid-noughties for Forest, and he was just unreal. Watching him glide across the City Ground pitch. I mean, I always think of that goal against it was West Ham, wasn't it?
Away.
Yeah, well,
I was there for that. That was amazing. First minute.
Unbelievable. And what I loved about Reedy as well was, like, he seemed like he was rapid despite not being fast, because of the way he just was gliding across the pitch. And then with that left foot, he could sort of do anything with it. Like he would caress the ball in such different ways and produce all these sort of totally different finishes and passes that I don't think I'd really seen before. And he was just phenomenal. And like, that's a real sense memory, is him just sort of charging down the left and through the middle. And Brennan Johnson is just, for me, like the symbol of that promotion, I guess. Really, he was sort of the game changer that we needed to he was electric and impossible to defend against. And I think back to those. I think it was Blackpool where he scored the two were totally different. The sort of drilled finish across the far post, and then that chip. And I think I remember thinking then, like, you know, this is proper stuff's happening here, and this guy is unreal. So I think he had to be in there. Front two, I mean, I've talked about Pierre van Hooijdonk, and what a mad spectacle of a footballer he was. Enormous, but the most graceful, elegant footballer as well. Like, just insane touch. And those, when I think football, I think of Pierre van Hooijdonk's long legs and those predators with the big white stripes and the tongue, and that's what I want. And then I've gone with Taiwo with him, because there's loads of names I could have gone with. Kevin Campbell was an obvious thought, but I wanted to have a bit of presence from recent past, and Taiwo, what he did for us in keeping us up and just bullying some of the world's best defenders with this incredible smile on his face and just sheer joy. He one of those players that made me feel sort of part of what I was experiencing on the pitch, what I was seeing on the pitch. So I wanted him back, because he's just been a joy.
Well, we can't argue with any of that. That's Blackburn's Reds, a fantastic team. It's always a personal choice. That's what we want. You've made a case for all of them, so we can't argue one shred of that. Now then, it's time for this.
The lightning round!
Yes, unashamedly ripping off friends as we do, Pete. So hope you don't mind that. But we're just going to run through these quickly because I know we're running out of time, like Greg mentioned. So we'll rapidly run through the question. What was your first match live?
I'll just have to say the Borough one in '98 because I can't actually remember the previous ones.
Brilliant. Yeah, I know that's a good result too, right? You said 4-0.
Just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, favorite Forest player of all time.
I said Pierre Van Hooydonk on Forest Focus, and I think I've explained all the sort of mad evocative reasons for that, so I'll go with that. Brilliant.
What player in Forest history would you like to see on the current squad?
Oh, what a big question that is. I'm going to break my earlier rules and say Stan Collymore. I mean, Wood's been amazing, but my God, that guy would be the ultimate Premier League striker, both feet, strong, quick, everything. I would love to see that.
Yeah, can you imagine where we'd be in the table if we had him, even though Wood's been fantastic? Oh, my goodness.
We'd have won the league already.
Yeah, your favorite away or third kit?
Well, this one probably. Honourable mention to the yellow mess with all the nonsense all over it. That was great. But yeah, probably this one.
Excellent. What is your favorite Forest moment or memory?
Oh, I think I probably answered this already. I think the sense memory of being in the stand for the Sheffield United playoff game and the endless Forester magic noise. It felt like the stands were shaking. I mean, it felt like West Bridgford was going to erupt. And I just knew that we were, something magical was happening. We were sort of carrying them over the line.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's like one of the few times where I've had to be careful because I was like literally bawling at work. That and getting through the final, I was just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to go into a meeting looking like this? But and explain why. Yeah. All right. If you weren't a Forest fan, what club would you support? I think you mentioned this before, but
yeah, I guess Boston United because it's family history for me, and I still go very occasionally. Got soft spots for Notts and Mansfield as well, having covered them.
Apart from Cloughier Cooper, who was your favorite Forest manager?
Well, I love Frank Clark. Had the pleasure of interviewing him a few times, and I got an awful lot of respect for him. But I didn't see an awful lot of his Forest team, so I think I'd probably have to say Paul Hart. I mean that Forest's playoff side was just, oh my word, extraordinary football, and so many players in that team that wanted to put in my favourite 11, but I was trying to sort of blend it through the years.
Yeah.
Aaron Huckabee striding through the middle of the pitch with Johnson and Harewood ahead of him, and that is insane.
Yeah. Amazing. Incredible. Forest could sign one player from a non-top 6 side. Who would it be? Your Villas, your Bournemouths, your Wolves, Crystal Palace, etc. Fulham.
What a good question. Oh, you know what? The other day, this is probably not the best answer, but the other day I was sort of dreaming about Mateus Cunha playing up front for Forest, and I think that would be phenomenal because he's sort of got everything. Could drop in and link up with the midfielders and then slip in those pacey wide men, but he's a threat of his own, and I'd love that.
Yeah, in our own chat, I think we were talking about players who maybe end up getting relegated. We might poach. That was my number one for sure. I agree with you on that.
You'd need a fair bit of cash still, even if they went down, I think. But yeah, I'd love that.
That's true. Who would you rather sell first, Murillo or Morgan Gibbs-White?
I think I've always said Murillo, so I'll have to stick with that. I just don't think he's too big for us. He's waiting for Real Madrid £100 million transfer or something, isn't he? Like he just looks like he's going to be on that sort of stage. And I've got an insane attachment to Morgan Gibbs-White. So I think I'd have to do that.
Yeah, you and me both. All right, final question. Forest win the Premier League, but are then relegated into the Championship for the next 25 years. Would you take it?
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely would. Sorry, I was just trying to compute the question. I definitely would because football's not about just, hanging on. It's about those incredible moments. And, in 25 years, when we're back on here and you're asking me again, I'd be saying, well, my favourite moment was when we won the Premier League.
There you go. Yeah, we've suddenly tipped the scales. It used to be absolutely no. And now all of a sudden we've got way more people saying yes, which is fantastic. Well done, mate.
No VAR, and I'd have the memories, so I'd be fine with it.
There you go.
I am so good at lightning rounds.
Pete is so good.
So, guys, we're nearly out of time, but I have come up with another kind of add-on feature to the lightning round, just to kind of twist it up a little bit. So here it comes.
Name that grandmother.
Yes. This is Name That Grandmother. So quick fire, Pete, coming at you. Marmite, love it or hate it?
Love.
How am I cooking your steak?
Medium rare.
What's your favourite cheese?
I'll be patriotic to the local area and say Blue Stilton.
What's the best sandwich?
Oh, mate, what an enormous question. Oh, God.
Do we finally get a Pete Blackburn? I don't know.
No, well, actually, the truth is I don't know. Yeah, I think a really good BLT is pretty amazing.
And please, 2.
Name that grandmother.
Tell us your grandmother's names.
Well, this is a bit nuts actually because they're both called Evelyn, or but were called Evelyn.
Wow.
Oh my
Lovely
goodness.
name. My wife's Evelina, so that's a derivative of Evelyn. So there you go. Thank you very much. So we're just kind of finding out a little bit more about you there, Pete.
That feels like the sort of question that's going to give away a few people's passwords.
possibly. But listen, it's been an epic show today. I want to end things with a closing thought that it is Men's Mental Health Month in November, and we have tried to champion positive mental health on Talking Reds, but focusing on men's mental health this time. November is Men's Mental Health Month. We want to remind every male that not just today, but every day, your life does matter. When you perhaps feel things are hopeless and dark, don't give up. You've come this far for a reason. You've got the strength to get through any inner battle you're facing. And remember, you're never alone. You've got a purpose and people who know you love you, even when your brain tells you otherwise. We believe in the power of community. One thing that we've talked about on Talking Reds was the impact that Forest Focus had on both Richard and I in terms of our positive mental health, because for people that live outside Nottingham, and I know that I speak for a lot of people in the rest of the world, that sense of community that stretches out when you are watching a podcast and interacting with other Forest fans, it just feels so good. It feels like you're really part of something. And so if we can in any way do some of that ourselves with anyone watching and listening, then we hope that that is the case. You know, finding someone to talk to is not always the easiest thing. Sometimes finding a stranger to talk to is easier. Our DMs are always open. If you're struggling out there, then we want you to know that you are not alone, and we're Talking Reds have got your back, and you know we're available 24/7 for you. Okay, Pete, it's been an extraordinary hour and 17 minutes. We can't thank you enough for joining us. With the floor is yours as ever, to give us your closing thoughts. Anything you want to say before we say bye-bye?
No, nothing else apart from to say thank you for having me on. I very much echo everything that you just said about men's mental health. Very well said. It's been a pleasure, and I also an apology for me because I fear that the reason this has taken an hour and 20 minutes is because I've rambled on forever.
No, not at all. We've quite often crossed into this time of area, and the truth is that once you get going, the time just fly. You just don't even realise and I'd let it go on forever and ever and ever, but people are eventually going to get a little bit sick and tired of us, I'm sure. But no, not at all. You've been awesome. Thank you so much, Richard, over in Oklahoma. Hope the rest of your day is a good one. It's nice to know. What time is it over there at the moment, Richard?
5:49.
5:49. Yeah. So, Richard, any closing thoughts before we say bye-bye?
No, just I can't echo more than what's been said in the chat about Pete. He was gracious enough to allow me to chat with him in WhatsApp here and there, and just a top human being. And I always appreciate. He always apologizes for his romanticism, but I always like that about him. And him and I have chatted about taking our kids to matches and how important that will be at the city ground, because that's what matters to us, because it's a part of who we are, and it's a part of our own personal legacy and history. So I love it, man. Keep that same depth, that same emotion, that same romanticism. It's so needed, and it's so wonderful. So thank you. Absolutely incredible to have you on, man.
There's been lots of people in the comments. If I didn't get a chance to read you out, I do apologise, but time was against us. Really appreciate everybody taking part. Just also to say that I am going to be at the Newcastle game on Sunday. I'll be in the NAV beforehand, so if anybody's around, it'd be great to say hello. And also, I did write a piece for the Oh Missed Rolling In fanzine on Nikola Milenkovic. So if you can pick up a copy, that is going to be available before the Newcastle game. And there's a bit in there, as I say, that I've written on Milenkovic and his impact on Forest. So in the meantime, all I can say to you is that it's been absolute joy. This has been the one with Pete Blackburn, and we'll see you next time.